Mahalaga po ang pag-uusapan. May kinalaman po ito sa Saligang Batas ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Ang pinakahuling Saligang Batas ay 1987 Constitution. Mahalaga pong pag-usapan ito sapagkat mayroong mga panawagan na kailangan ng baguhin ito, susugan, sapagkat sumasagka umano sa pagpasok ng foreign direct investments. May nagsasabi na dapat magkaroon ng Constitutional Convention, magkaroon ng Constituent Assembly, pero magkakaroon ng pagboto separately ang House of Representatives at ang Senate of the Philippines. Ngayong umaga, ang paksa, Saligang Batas, Papalitan o Sususugan na ba? At sa anong paraan? Knowledgeable people who will share their views and opinions on what ought to be as far as the country's constitution is concerned. And we're talking of the 1987 Constitution. We have with us Congressman Neri Colmenares, party list lawmaker from Bayan of the 16th Congress. We have Atty. Lumauig, Deputy Secretary General of PHILCONSA, and Atty. Dumlao, Vice President for Luzon of PHILCONSA. So, at this point, let me ask Congressman Neri Colmenares, what's going on at the House of Representatives? What's the latest about the Constitution?
The Chacha resolution was sponsored in the floor. So we were ready for the debates. Surprisingly, the debates did not take place. They said, pwedeng next time na lang. So until now, it has not taken place. So we're thinking, what is the game plan? Because we're going to have our recess next week. By next week, Congress will adjourn, sinidye. And then the next time we meet will be SONA na. So we don't know what the game plan is, but those naman who are questioning the propriety either of the process or of the substantive content of the proposals are gearing up for the debates. And we hope that we will all be given time to discuss such a very important issue rather than it be fast-track again. The Chacha will not only affect the present generation, but will definitely affect the next generation of Filipinos.
Congressman, are you at all surprised with the maneuvers being made by the House of Representatives? Because the House of Representatives is known for twists and turns and surprises.
Actually, we were. In fact, Chacha came out of the blue suddenly. It always crops up every Congress. And every Congress, the people's, it rose up to outrage, always managed to stymie the efforts to Chacha. The credibility of Congress has always been at stake in all these issues, especially the suspicion of people that there will be term extensions. So even if in the entire 4 or 5 times they attempted to Chacha, we were just a small minority. Probably not even 10% of the entire Congress. 90% always support Chacha. But we were able to stop it because of the outrage outside. Now, it cropped up again, but after a very fast-paced hearing, and we filed a motion for public consultations in all regions. They did not accede to that. We even compromised and said, look, 2 regions in Luzon, 2 regions in Visayas, 2 regions in Mindanao. They even didn't accede to that. But after that, it seemed to stop at the plenary. So we're still gearing up for the possible debates this week, although if they're going to follow the procedure, if the debates start today, it will not finish by next week to further debate on the issues because there are many who are going to interpolate.
What about, should the leadership opt to call for a special session? Do you think it's in order?
Well, we are against Chacha. We think Congress should focus on very important bills. There is the bill to amend IPIRA. This is a direct relation to our economy and poverty. There is a bill to pass the law that will prohibit the pork barrel system. This will affect poverty of the people and graft and corruption. There are bills on 125 peso wage increase. We have a bill to increase the pension of all SSS members. There are so many bills that can be focused on by Congress. And Chacha, so far in their explanation, they have failed to provide the nexus between Chacha and poverty. In fact, I've always said that where's the nexus? They just cite some anecdotal examples of countries with high FDIs or foreign direct investments who made it well, who made it good. But there are also countries with very high foreign direct investments that didn't do good. So there is no nexus there. So the fact that they failed to explain the relationship between Chacha and poverty puts into question whether or not it should be rushed, especially giving Congress such a huge power. No? So because they failed to provide that, I think if there is ever a special session, it should tackle very timely and relevant bills rather than a bill that is designed by some members of Congress bypassing various procedures, including consultations with the people and other sectors of society.
Thank you very much. Can we hear from the Deputy Secretary General PHILCONSA and the Vice President for Luzon? Let's start with the Deputy Secretary General, Attorney Romulo Lumauig. What do you have to say about the moves to change or amend the Constitution?
We in PHILCONSA, whenever the term or the phrase says amendment comes or bruited about, we easily fall again into the records of history because our Constitution is patterned that after the U.S. And the U.S. Constitution, which was founded in 1876, it took only 26 amendments since then. And ours is only a few years ago, and there's a flurry of proposals to amend the Constitution. And so we're a little bit overly cautious on this, especially as mentioned by His Honor Congressman Colmenares, the processes like Constituent Assembly and the various kinds of changes that they wanted are, I would say, matters that are quite serious and should not be taken lightly. This is an instrument which is, to us, very sacrosanct for the people. And it should be studied thoroughly. Although, of course, as early as 1950, the PHILCONSA always stood for a position that if there is going to be an amendment, it should be through a constitutional convention and not through a group of interested parties already there who could be very, I would say, could be very serious but sometimes whimsical in their propositions regarding the amendment.
During the Roman Empire era, Mel Brooks was quoted as saying, "We have the best Senate money could buy." Are you worried that in a similar way as people are, with the way money works, especially with the disbursement appropriations program of Malacanang, will influence whatever moves there will be at the House and the Senate?
You just mentioned it very explicitly, Mel. With the things going on around now, it puts us on a double guard. It makes us already, I would say, very extremely cautious that this kind of processes might just occur in the manner that you were talking about. And that's why we're always on the guard, but we're always on the safer side, that matters like this of serious consequence should be studied thoroughly. And only, of course, we reiterate our position in the PHILCONSA that it's only through a constitutional convention that perhaps we could really distill the desire of the people and the people desiring what they would like to do, and not through a few people who are already in power deciding on what should be done for them.
Let me ask Attorney Dumlao. While it is a very welcome move to have a constitutional convention, do you think the PICOS would guarantee that the right people will write the Constitution?
We don't want to repeat a 60-30-10 arrangement again in the coming election. And that can only be done through the PICOS. We would rather go for a manual election, and the transmission probably can be done through the electronic system because you can check the figures in the source and you can recheck it, the figures at the end of the line. So the people can see. I think the problem here is to allow the people to see if their votes were properly counted in terms of election. And if they do not see that their votes were properly counted, there's where they begin to doubt the genuineness of the election.
People from political dynasties may get themselves elected. Should there be a constitutional convention?
Probably yes. They will elect the relatives to the concon. But at least the people will have a chance to elect those who should sit in the convention. If it's a chacha con us at this time, Mel, we were told last week that now after the declaration of PDAF as unconstitutional, all the money are now consolidated under the hands of Secretary Abad and President Aquino. Whether that's true or not, but at least PDAF has been declared unconstitutional.
However,
But let me continue with the DAP.
please.
So it's a scheme to use the money. And there has been a lot of reports, insinuations that the PDAF was used to impeach Chief Justice Renato Corona. Is there an assurance that they will not use the PDAF or the DAP or any other consolidated fund in Malacanang to bring about a CONAS?
Are you saying it's a bad idea?
Well, it's just that the elite will only be the one to benefit. That's the sad part of it.
Mr. Congressman, you have a Committee on Appropriations
Yes.
chair who has a similar name.
Yes, well, two things muna I agree with Attorney Hermy. One, because we have always been for automated election, believing that manual elections is the cause of so many electoral fraud, so much electoral fraud. We think there is no room for that in the next election. So for us, we are now open to a system of mixed automated and manual where in the precinct there is manual voting so that there is a counter check. The canvassing should be automated. In the first place, the cheating really happens in the canvassing. There are very few votes in the precinct. It's 200 to 300 votes. So the dagdag bawas actually happens in the canvassing. Secondly, the delay in elections doesn't usually happen in the precinct. The precinct counting is finished by 12 midnight or the next day at most. But the canvassing, that takes weeks. So doon yung automation at para ang tao, may verification siya doon sa boto niya, may balota talagang makikita at mababasa ng watcher. We are now open to a mixed, we call it a transparent, automated, participatory system, election system. That's one. Secondly, with regards the pork barrel issue, I also agree with Attorney Hermy na it exists. First, the PDAF has been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, but the leadership of Congress has also actually admitted that one, this PDAF has been realigned to various agencies, 35%, DPWH, 15%, etc. So we have always contested that assertion that PDAF is no longer there. However, the same system of a pork barrel continues to exist. So we've always, after the passage of the 2014 budget, we even stood up and said that the budget is full of pork barrel, one of which is the PDAF itself. But PDAF is just 25 billion pesos. What is the largest pork barrel in the budget? That's the presidential pork, which Attorney Hermy said is in the hands of the President and the DBM Secretary. You see, pork barrel comes in various forms, but one of the largest and the most insidious form of pork barrel is called the lump sum. The moment there is a lump sum in the budget, that is pork. How do we define pork barrel? Pork barrel is defined as a public fund. The discretion of who the beneficiary is, what project, and how much rests in only one person. The moment public fund is decided by a single person, kung kanino pupunta yan, magkano, etc., that becomes a pork barrel. So a lump sum practically follows that definition, because if it's a lump sum, then only one person decides where it goes. They refuse to itemize it. So As an example, we've always said, why is it 20 billion pesos for the repair of national roads? That's a lump sum. Why don't you itemize it? I'm sure you know which roads you want to repair next year. So why don't you pinpoint 120 million from EDSA North to EDSA Quezon Avenue for the repair of that road? At least it's itemized. But if it's 20 billion pesos for the repair of national roads, then it can be transferred anywhere. If Quezon City is the mayor is your opponent, you don't put it there, you put it somewhere. But if it's itemized, no matter who the mayor of Quezon City is, you're forced to put it there because the budget is there. So for us, the budget must be decided by a collective whole. And the itemization of the budget ensures that it was decided and discussed by Congress, both the Senate and the House, while a lump sum amount, Congress just decided to give 20 billion pesos for the repair of roads, but in the end, it's the President and Secretary Abad who decides kanino namin ibigay ito. They can give it to their allies and not to their opponents, which in the end makes a pork barrel evil, not only because it is a source of graft and corruption, but also because of patronage politics. So rest assured, the pork barrel system is alive and kicking in the 2014 budget, and there is a need for the removal of such system. At hindi pa tapos yung laban yan.
Okay, let me ask our gentlemen from PHILCONSA, attorneys Lumauig and Dumlao. During the 1971 Constitutional Convention, I was still in my high school years, there was this scandal about a certain assemblyman named Quintero, allegedly from Malacanang, which included some Rolex watches, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever happened to it? Please refresh my memory, because I got lost monitoring because habeas corpus was declared and later on martial law was declared. Whatever happened to Quintero? Even when a constitutional convention comes into offing, what guarantees have we that Payola will not get into the picture?
Thank you, Mel. Yes, I also recall the Quintero story, which was always in the papers during the convention proceedings. And of course, when you think of the setup of what a convention is and the situation of the present leadership of the country, where it's always considered that the president is a very powerful president, and who calls for a constitutional convention, goes along with it already the ability to influence or the strength to influence. And I think that's what happened with the Quintero incident. And anyway, even if it was ventilated in the papers, though, and taken in its very negative aspect, still there were ongoing attempts, I would say, influence, because of the very nature of the power of the president of the country, with his extensive powers to influence everything that's going on. And remember, he's the one that calls for a constitutional convention. Now, as for the late, lamentable constitutional delegate Quintero, I understand he has passed away already. And we hope that there will be no repetition of this in the so-called frenzy for an amendment, whether it's CONAS or whatever it is, Constituent Assembly, but hopefully not in the Constitutional Convention which the PHILCONSA is always proposing.
Yes, Attorney Hermy, would like to add to the discussion?
The Quintero issue was buried with martial law. When martial law was declared, everybody forgot Quintero. Anyway, we still want to bat for a constitutional convention for the reason that if you have a constitutional convention, more people will be involved. And as I said earlier, the citizenry will have a chance to choose, even if they're dictated by the elite in their respective regions. I still want to take that chance.
Okay. Thank you very much. What is wrong with the Constitution that there are calls for us to amend or change it? Attorney Neri.
Our position on Chacha is basically based on, one, the process itself is skewed, being undertaken by Congress now, no? And two, that, as I mentioned a while ago, they have failed to show any relationship between Chacha and poverty, for example. And three, of course, the substantive aspects. Let's go to the process. There are 3 processes under the Constitution: Con-Us, and People's Initiative. Their Con-Us here, we believe, is not contemplated by the Constitution. Con-Us, we believe, it's Congress, both houses, jointly assembled but voting separately as the 1935 Constitution so says. The fact that the current Constitution does not contain such a direct provision but merely says that Congress, by a vote of 3/4 of all its members, can propose amendments to the Constitution does not mean that such a provision is no longer there. In fact, the assertion of the Chacha proponents that there is no need for both houses of Congress to convene because of the constitutional provision, actually, the Constitution doesn't say whether the 2 houses has to convene jointly or the 2 houses do not have to convene jointly. So if the provision is not clear on that issue, you go back to the intent. And the intent has been admitted by Justice Acuña himself, who is one of the proponents of Chacha. They were contemplating of putting in the 1935 constitutional provision that both houses should convene jointly but voting separately, but they forgot. And Justice Acuña said during the hearing, senior moments. So be it. They forgot to put that in. So, but the fact is, it is clear from Justice Acuña's own admission, compounded, of course, by the assertion of Chief Justice Puno and Justice Mendoza during the hearing, that the intent of the constitutional framers was to put in the 1935 Constitution. So the proposal of the proponents of this 4th mode, where it's a con-us but it's treated like a law where parang batas lang na pinapasa, is not found in the Constitution. So the process itself is wrong and unconstitutional. Second, as I mentioned, they failed to really prove in many of their studies the various issues that will relate to poverty. In fact, we said, you can change the Constitution 10 times a year, and as long the basic social, political, and economic relations that exist today will exist tomorrow, the same poverty will exist, the same corruption will exist. You can change it every year, and nothing will happen because that is not, the Constitution is not the root of the problem and therefore could not be the solution. I'll just go to the substantive. For us, the tendency of government to open up the economy to foreign investments is wrong. It has been tried before. Since I was a kid, I remember since all presidents who went abroad until now, every time they come back from abroad, they always say, I brought with me $100 million worth of foreign investment, $1 billion worth of investment. Did our economy change? O mangat ba buhay natin? Hindi. Because foreign investment-led economic strategy is wrong. For us, in Bayan muna, the economic strategy should be, first, national industrialization. It's when government will focus a huge part of capital for the industry itself. It could be steel industry, copper smelting industry, manufacturing industry, because this is where people get employed. The moment hundreds of factories and industries sprout all over the country, employment is there. You don't even need to go abroad. And secondly, this is wrong. For example, 3 months ago, we had a hearing on foreign affairs, and the DFA said, oh, we had a trade imbalance with Iran. Why? Because we imported from Iran copper ore. I nearly fell off my seat. Why did we import copper ore from Iran? I know a lot of copper mines. I came from the Visayas. There are lots of copper mines there. So why do we even have to import from Iran? The fact is, even what we mine here is transferred back to these countries. They process it a little and sell it back to us at a higher price. So basic yung ano namin yan, I came from Negros eh. Gumagawa tayo ng asukal, ibenta natin sa US o sa Japan o saan pa man, they transform it into chocolate and sell it to us. Why don't we have a factory that turns it into chocolate, di ba? That's just an example. No?
Yes.
But that's how I explain it to the people who don't understand it, that industrialization is a must. So, of course, before industrialization can take place, as many countries have experienced, you cannot industrialize without a genuine agrarian reform. So, of course, it's a twin component economic strategy we've been proposing. You sell lands to foreigners, That's, of course, land is very expensive now. The moment foreigners can come in and buy land, it will become more expensive. Then goodbye land reform. Many LGUs will convert their agricultural lands into residential or commercial so that it can be bought by foreigners. And lastly, that is also a security issue. What if countries who we are not friendly with begin buying lands in beaches and beachheads all over the island? So,
Are you referring to China?
I am referring to China. So, in fact, we've sold our public utility to China already. So, and the cha-cha they're proposing is that public utilities can now be 100% owned and amend the constitutional provision that limits foreign ownership of public utilities to only 40%. So, sa aga na namin, don't you even feel that there is a security issue in cha-cha, especially if you push it now? So, there were many reasons against cha-cha, but the proponents have no reason at all, for now at least, to show that when you sell your lands to foreigners and public utilities to foreigners, we will be okay here. So I guess that's why our reason against cha-cha is not merely a sloganeering, but a well-studied position on our part against the proposed amendments.
Can we hear from the gentlemen, Attorney Romy and Attorney Hermy, what's wrong with the Constitution that these people would like to have it altered or amended? Is there anything wrong that you see in the Constitution?
Yes, Mel. When we begin to think of it deeply, why are they so intent on having the Constitution amended? Now, look at the source that are proposing the amendments. They are the ones actually in power now. And what is the characteristic of being in power? When you are in power, you want power, power, power all the time. And I'm referring to power as contrasted to patriotism. Patriotism means love of country, while power means love for power and control. If this, those in power now would only be a little bit much more patriotic, would love their country but little much more, all that's what happened in the country now would not have happened. It's because they don't love their country. What they love is power. It's in amending the Constitution that they could perpetuate themselves into power.
You said, you asked the question, should the Constitution be amended now?
Yes.
I'm referring to the structure of our government, Mel. And for as long as we do not change the structure of our government, the elite, which controls the wealth of this country, about 5 to 7% of them will always be there. Not only the economy, the wealth, but also political power in this country. And unless we change the structure, even if assuming we have leadership, we have the vision to make this country great, it will never be done. We have to change the structure now.
So what should happen? What ought to happen, Attorney Hermy?
Well, what ought to happen is if we amend the Constitution at all, then let's look at the structure of government. Presidential, where you have all the elite controlling or hovering around the president, or we allow some talented guys from Zamboanga, from Surigao del Sur, or from Basilan, Tawi-Tawi, to also share their talents to make this country great.
Yeah, I heard someone say this country will be great again during the 60s. I was in my elementary grades.
Well, that was in 1965.
65, yes. This country will be great again. This nation can be great again. But anyway, that's another case. That's another chapter in our history. Now, let me just ask you, gentlemen, there is this provision in our Constitution which says the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. In its relations with other states, the paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. How independent is our foreign policy? Objectively looking at it. Attorney Hermy, let's start from your end.
The perception of students of politics, Mel, is that a lot of influence is being exerted by foreign powers in our foreign policy. For instance, we just had the EDCA. Does it affect foreign policy? Of course it does. But at least we had the assurance of President Obama, we'll be behind you
The problem is we're in front and they're behind. Wouldn't it
In
be
fact-
better
in
if we're
fact,
shoulder to shoulder?
I wanted to ask the question, how far behind?
Okay. 4 years maybe, as during the Japanese occupation.
Well, we just reviewed what happened in World War II. They went to Bataan, they went to the U.S. cemetery. We reviewed it. And so you asked the question, how much independent is our foreign policy? My answer, it's not independent.
The good gentleman mentioned about being patriotic and, this love for country. Now, do you think the EDCA was initiated really by the Philippines, or was it instituted on us by some foreign power as the Americans?
Yes. They were a bit cagey. When I asked that during a congressional hearing, I said, who started this? They said, simultaneous. We met halfway, and lo and behold, suddenly both of them probably at the same time said, let's have EDCA together, do it. So I don't believe that. I think the pivot of the U.S. to the region has long been planned many years ago, and EDCA is just a result of that. What is the problem with EDCA in terms of independent foreign policy? Let's just go to the brass tacks. Let's not even talk of sovereignty here and the constitutional provision. What kind of a government with a national pride would say that, American soldiers coming over here can go into thousands or 10,000 or 100,000 without even any limit? Secondly, what kind of government would say that, and these thousands of Americans did not apply for a visa or passport? While Filipinos going to the U.S., if you're found without a visa, you're treated like a dog and deported. Americans come over without even a visa. Why? What is the reason? That's why they cannot even know how many U.S. soldiers are here under the VFA, because the regulatory tool of a visa is not present. What gives? What is the reason? They couldn't answer that. Why are you going to give in EDCA, Article 3, that the United States shall pay their electricity, water, and other public utilities at a cost lower than that paid by ordinary Filipinos? What is the reason for that? They can afford to pay double what ordinary Filipinos pay in terms of public utilities. In fact, they're not even renting the whole base that they're going to construct here. Pati public utility, mababa pa. Why are you going to exempt them under the same Article 3 payment of VAT for the use of electricity? While we burdened with VAT in our electricity, the U.S. is granted exemption from VAT. What is that? I thought government is saying that we need VAT because we need money for our DAP and for our pork. But now they're exempting the U.S. What kind of government will say that the moment you want to access not just national government lands, ports, and airports, but even local government units, lands, and facilities, the government shall facilitate the access to these lands upon the mere request? What kind of government will agree to this provision which says the moment an accused in a crime, whether it's rape or whatever crime, the moment the custody of an accused is requested by the United States, the Philippine government shall turn over jurisdiction of the accused to the U.S. Why? But there is no similar provision of Filipinos going to the United States that the moment the Philippine government requests, the U.S. government shall turn over the accused to us. Why? Is that a request in the first place? A request by any definition means it's something which you can deny. But the moment the EDCA provides that upon the request, you shall, that is not a request, that is an order. Is that not humiliating? That a person who commits crime here and we have no discretion to hold him in custody? So for me, that immediately shows what kind of a negotiation EDCA was. Even if you think that EDCA is necessary against China, which we disagree with anyway, but even if you think that, those components of the agreement shows the national humiliation we are going to suffer. And we're going now to the constitutional provision which says that upon the expiration of the USRP military bases agreement in 1991, there was even not a year, no foreign troops, bases, or facilities shall be allowed entry into the Philippines absent a treaty concurred in by the Senate, and if Congress so decide, to pass through the approval of the people in a plebiscite called for such purpose. So why, I mean, they're going back to the Mutual Defense Treaty in the 1953. If it is true, their legal argumentation is true, that an executive agreement can be suffice because of the MDT, then that transitory provision will never take effect at all. So, di ba? If that's the case, and if it's true, then it's a useless provision because there is no need for a treaty ever, because there's always the MDT. But why did the constitutional framers put that in? The constitutional framers believe that despite MDT, there is a need for a treaty. Simple lang naman ang Constitution eh. You consult the Senate. O, di ba? Consult the Senate. What's wrong with that? If the Senate believes that, it's necessary, so be it. You consult Congress whether or not to call for a plebiscite. Then you consult the people in a plebiscite. After all, it's their lives are going to be put at risk if the bases are here and we become magnets of attacks to all the enemies of the United States, and they have a lot. What's wrong with consulting the people who will die if ever a war with the US and Russia or US and Syria happens? So for us, it's a very reasonable demand, but the Malacanang believes that it need not consult the Senate, it did not consult both houses of Congress, and it need not consult the Filipino people because all of them don't know what's best, and only Malacanang knows what's best.
Okay, let me ask you, Congressman Neri, do you think the EDCA was an offshoot of the adverse reaction of Okinawans against the U.S. base in their part, in their country, in their island?
Yes and no. For me, the U.S. after 1991 have always been giving the Philippines a moist eye. They've always wanted to come back. After all, about trillions of dollars worth of trade, their trade, passed by the Straits of Malacca and many other areas in the Southeast Asia. So they really wanted to come back. However, the response of the people in 1991 and the antagonism of the people for the return of the bases have always been there. So they tried to, skirt it by a visiting forces agreement. Anyway, they don't need a physical base. They just need the presence here, and the technology will do that. However, I think the impact of the struggle of the Japanese people against the bases too, and I have been to Japan, once only when I was a student, from Kyoto, from the Kansai district up to Tokyo, to discuss and share our conditions with the presence of Clark and Subic. The Japanese people have long wanted to maintain what the peace constitution of Japan wanted to do, that Japan should not be involved in any of U.S. wars. After all, if you have a base in Japan, the U.S. can use this base to launch attacks and military operations, covert or overt, against any other country. And the Japanese government cannot do anything with that. And I think the Japanese people do not want that. That is why they have to also seek a replacement, precisely because it may be untenable in the future if the bases can stay in Japan. So the Philippines is a good alternative, and the government here is more pliant to their demands. So while I think, if I read somewhere that the U.S. pay rent to Japan, while the Philippines did not even ask for rent. No offense to our Japanese friends, but didn't the U.S. say that Japan was the enemy in World War II and the Philippines was the friend? Now, we're given the shorter end of the stick, merely because, of course, Japan is a bigger counterpart than the U.S. And lastly, we don't believe the U.S. will go to war against China. U.S. owes China $1.28 trillion. And anytime the Chinese government will withdraw that $1.28 trillion, then that's it. Secondly, what is the trade between the United States and China? 2012, $579 billion is the total trade between China and the U.S. Philippines, $16.8 billion in 2012. Choose which one will you rather risk. When everything you buy in the U.S. now is made in China, I couldn't find a made in USA in the U.S. The Obama practically admitted it. What did he say? He declared openly what we call the two enormouses. The U.S. and China have enormous trade relation and enormous economic relations.
Okay.
Therefore, we are not here to contain China. We are not here to counter China. But we need to balance everything. That practically is an admission on the part of the U.S. that they will not be there if only because they want to help the Filipino people.
Attorney Lumauig, given such a situation, what future will there be for us, ordinary Filipinos?
I fully agree with what he said, and I would adapt everything that he said as a part of mine. And so, what future then? Could you, with that kind of situation pictured by Congressman Colmenares? But then, of course, as they say, the saying in literature, hope remains eternal in the human breast. We, as a people, the Filipino people, who was used to what would you call the benefits of freedom before all these invaders came into our country, still cherish in our hearts that some days we should be able to establish a government that's really reflective of our people, of our desires, and of our principle as a freedom-loving people, and not at the dictates of any foreign power. As if you recall, there was a time in the 1935 Constitution when the late Senator Recto said that the 1935 Constitution is not a Philippine Constitution. It was done by the Americans because of the tidings of McDuffie Law, where they mandated that it should be a Republican government. So we were not able to fashion a government that would suit our culture and our own kind of setup. And this is the situation now that we are facing in. And it's really, I would say, very, well, it's a sad state. But as I said, as a Christian country, as a people who believe that there is a higher power that could determine the destinies of man, we are still hopeful that one day, perhaps, there will be a, what do you call this, a golden warrior that will come over, like for instance, Congressman Colmenares, who will be able to come forth and say, this is the kind of country that we should establish. Forget all about the foreign people that are coming in.
Ramon de Rosario said, restrictive foreign ownership rules is one of three major impediments. The two other is, well, of course, high levels of corruption and labor costs. According to Boy Blue de Rosario, ASEAN countries will show we have the highest number of sectors with ownership restrictions. Do you think this should be amended in the Constitution?
Mel, we have made our position clear on that. The PHILCONSA have already sent its proposals to amend the Constitution and those issues. And I think it's clear the PHILCONSA is supporting amendments to this. But there should be guarantees. Guarantees being that we hope that the proposals to amend the economic provisions will not also be an instrument to extend the term of powers of those who will institute amendments.
But there is no guarantee that with the opening of the Constitution that it will open the floodgates to more amendments.
I agree. The moment you open the Constitution for amendments, there is no guarantee that you can restrict the agenda.
Yes.
There is none. So we are still hoping in the goodness of those who will propose amendments to the Constitution, Mel. Hope springs eternal, as Congressman Lumauig
Yeah,
said.
there was one who made money out of hope. He sold cigarettes.
Well, not only the one who sold the branded Hope cigarettes. He is a billionaire, but
Yes.
there were also Filipinos who made billions out of nothing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah,
And they're still around.
Yeah, we know some of them anyway. But they say, Mr. De Rosario even quoted Jerry Sikat, who said foreign ownership restrictions have resulted in undercapitalization of our public utilities, leading to the high cost and low quality of utility services, which means higher production costs for industry.
If it is true, and it has been admitted that we have money which were spent for PDAF, DAP, why didn't we spend this money to improve our manufacturing and agricultural sectors? Mr. Sikat has always been saying that we have to improve our manufacturing and agricultural sector, like what other countries in Southeast Asia have done.
Mhm.
Why can't we do that? Because we
okay.
want to use the money for political survival all the time?
Mhm. And that is the problem. What measures or what effort should we do, Attorney Romulo Lumauig, for us to prevent term extensions being introduced? Should there be a constitutional convention?
I seem to have read that there is already a bill or a law, bill passed in the Senate limiting participation on of the so-called dynasties, right? And therefore, I think this kind of effort should be fully supported. But I don't know if on the part of the House there was a companion bill that was also proposed. But in terms again of our hopes, now we go away with all these specifics. What really is needed is a transformational change, not only among the structures and everything that we have, but it should start in the hearts and minds of our own people, because they are the ones, the decision makers eventually. As long as we have a determined people who really are strong in their desire to have a thorough change in the setup of our system and government, then we're still very, what would say, very conscious that we could make that happen. Despite all the maneuverings that the present powers that we are doing, this could only be perhaps stymied when we have a, referred earlier, as a civil society or all the other portions of our society that could stand up and show to the people and show them that we are already, this is more than enough. This is enough. Enough is enough. We must now give the power to our own people.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
Congressman.
actually,
Before we open the floor to our friends from the media.
Well, there are three provisions in the Constitution for an amendment, and I think only the People's Initiative restricts the amendment provision. In the case of Lambino versus Comelec, which we battled against during the time of Arroyo, the Supreme Court was clear, the amendment must be specified. So at least doon alam mo na whether may term extension or wala. No? But in both the Constitutional Convention or the CONAS, there is really no assurance that the restriction as to what provisions will be amended is limited. No? What matters na lang is the credibility of the body to propose amendments not for self-interest but for the people's interest. The only difference between a CONCON and a CONAS is at least sa CONCON, di mo kilala kung sino ang membro ng CONCON kasi elect pa lang eh. But sa CONAS, kilala na natin ang miyembro ng Kongreso. And we know how far they have gone to promote their self-interest. So, yun lang talaga ang dangerous rin dito sa current stage. No? Secondly, kung even if there is an admission by Mr. Del Rosario and even Mr. Sikat about the three factors that affect our development, why don't they go ahead muna with corruption? After all, if you haven't eradicated corruption pala, then whatever amendment you provide in the Constitution for the entry of foreign direct investments would not happen. Because I've heard so many foreign investors who say, actually, we don't really need to own your lands. We have 50-year lease of your land, 75 years. You know, that's more than enough for us. But your corruption is one of those reasons why we're not going in there. So why go into that cha-cha? Doon mo muna tapusin yung corruption bago ka mag-cha-cha. So I don't see any justification at all for the support of Mr. Del Rosario to cha-cha when in fact he admits that whatever promise cha-cha has for economic development will not come about because of the very reasons he just mentioned, which is graft and corruption, among other things.
Napakaganda rito. Okay, we will open the floor to our media friends. Please, identify yourself.
We propose about this National People's Council as the fourth pillar of the political structure. As per our study, it is being done in many advanced countries like Germany and European countries. Even in the US, a local council, before they can dispose money, they will convene People's Council meeting, a sort of, for the approval. So in Singapore, it's very active, not to mention in China. Would you think this will be the missing link? Or if ever, can you adapt it as one of your position in PHILCONSA?
You look at Singapore now and you weep what happened to us after 50 years. That's my model. Its leadership, its vision, its the structure of government. And of course, as Congressman Neri said, no corruption. Thank you.
So we can work together. I mean, I can see you after this. And,
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very well. They will always recall, they looked upon the Philippines as their model because we were second to Japan during the 60s and now we're in the backwaters of ASEAN. Is it really because of the leadership or the lack of it or the dealership of people who got elected?
Anyway, Mel, I visit Congress every now and then, and most of the consultants of some of the congressmen are from UP and from NEDA. They do both. And that's one of the reasons why it's not easy to transfer personnel of the UP in Diliman because they deal with Batasan. Okay. What's the model, economic model of Thailand, of Singapore, of Indonesia? And who are the consultants of Vietnam now? They're UP people. Where did they get the model? From NEDA. Who are their advisors in agricultural development? From UP Los Baños. Most of our experts, they train here and they produce the rice in Thailand and we buy the rice from them. Structure. Leadership. And integrity. Integrity.
Okay.
I
So,
repeat that.
You're saying, sir, we should learn from Japan? From the Japanese leaders who value integrity more than ever?
Yes, those who commit crimes, they commit harakiri. I wish that's done here so that you can lessen the number of...
Would PHILCONSA be willing to buy samurais from Tabaco in Albay?
Why not?
Well, integrity is something which seems to be lacking, right?
Integrity to these young people, that's the basic. How can you entrust powers in government when you know that fellow does not have integrity? How can you entrust your money? Even if Congressman Neri will ensure that the budgetary restrictions are all there, the moment it's out, how can you ensure that it will be spent properly?
Very well. Would you care to add to the discussion about integrity?
Now, I would like to pick up from a statement of Congressman Colmenares about weeding out corruption, really.
Yes, please.
We have seen through all the years so many kinds of cases brought against people who were supposed to have violated the laws of the land. And yet they got scot-free. I was just thinking aloud, if we could have a similar setup in the U.S., if you remember the case of President Clinton, when there was a special prosecutor that was put up by the Attorney General, and in the case of even Reagan during the Iran North scandal, and even during the time of Carter, when Carter and his brother Bill was accused of having given some contract to a peanut butter company. If these cases that are now prevalent in the country could be fully prosecuted by a determined group of citizens, not of course by the ones that are under the aegis of the present government. Perhaps we could improve, we could really rid of the corruption if there is a determined effort to let all these people now being accused go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was just thinking, drawing this thing to Congressman Colmenares a few days ago, that there is a group that wanted to form a special committee to investigate the so-called violations now created of them because of the Napoles thing. If could there be a parallel move in Congress that we do not have any, we call, confidence anymore in the prosecution arm of the government. But there should be an independent group of prosecutors that could really pursue these charges against all these ones involved. And it's been hounding me for the last 2 nights, because when I learned that Congressman Colmenares will be with us, perhaps he could be able to explore this possibility of having a special prosecutor to handle all this crime against these corrupt people that we know in government.
Yes, but Attorney, don't you think the problem lies within the party structure? Because except for Bayan muna and some other party list, there is no difference, marked difference among political parties in the Philippines. And not only that, a politician can change party affiliation just like changing a Rotary pin to a Lions International pin while he's about to attend another meeting. How do you look at it?
Indeed, that's true, Alan. But as I said earlier, all this will redound ultimately, speaking of ultimates, who is now so jealous of his rights and privileges and his rights under the Constitution, pursues strongly, with determined effort, to assert his rights against all this infamy being done against him. That is my point. Unless we have an awakened citizenry who are really transformed essentially into righteous thinking and forge a strong coalition to move against all these grafters in government, then perhaps we could reach that point where Congressman Colmenares said that we will be able to rid of corruption. Change must be within the heart and the minds of the people. All of these agrupations say we are for a change, this is our righteous cause, but this is all empty words. Everything must stem really from the heart and the minds of those that claim to be so.
Paano kayo sa Congress? Dahil yung mga dating gloryang-gloria, yun ang Pinoy na Pinoy ngayon. So, paano po yun?
Doon nga kami medyo nag-react kay President Aquino recently when he cleared allies in Malacanang sa Napoles scam, even saying na walang credibility yung affidavit. Pag opposition yung laman ng affidavit, okay yun. Pag alyado na yung laman ng affidavit, hindi na credible yun. So, that's precisely what is happening today, no? It is as if the President is saying that all members of the Liberal Party are clean and those who are dirty only come from the opposition without knowing or without realizing that both parties anyway come from each other. Whether you're a member of the opposition or Lakas or NPC or Liberal, it's just an interchangeable pin, as Melo would say. So yeah, with regards to the independent commission being bandied about, that's precisely the reason, I think, for that idea now being proposed by many, not just from the Senate, is that the prosecution, the DOJ, the Ombudsman, and even the Sandigan Bayan is beginning to lose its credibility. People are beginning to tire with all these prosecutions that amounted to nothing. That's why there are people now saying, let's have an independent commission. Because wala nang tiwala doon sa prosecution ng kaso, and many people are beginning to believe that the anti-pork campaign is nothing more than an attempt to cripple opponents in 2016. So with regards to the suggestion of Attorney Lumauig for a special prosecutor, yes, if there is such an independent prosecutor, we would be happy even to volunteer with that committee if ever that will happen. But I guess the insistence always of the executive is that we leave it to the DOJ and to Malacanang, even if those concerned are members of the cabinet or allies of the president. So that's why, in the end, the credibility of the prosecution will really lose steam. And which is very sad, Melo, because people have put a lot of hope in the speedy and satisfactory resolution of this issue. Okay. That is why, just a last note on that, we believe that a bill criminalizing the pork barrel is important. It is a bill that says the moment you just put in the budget a lump sum or a pork barrel, 6 years imprisonment. It is a bill that will say the moment you intervene post-enactment and recommended, use it as a pork barrel, 6 years imprisonment. There's no need for a long-winded investigation. Support in the next coming months, especially since the people are beginning to get tired of the bungling of the investigation in the
Okay.
pork barrel scam.
In the interest of our friends from the media and from the diplomatic corps, let me ask you, with the kind of constitution, with the kind of treatment the prosecution is giving Napoles et al., what will happen to the Napoles thing, Napoles caper? Let's start with Attorney Hermy. Do you think something good will happen?
Nothing at all will happen, Mel. Where have you seen a prospective detainee to surrender to the President of the Republic?
Yes, Madam, yes. Madam Napoles.
So and then it has gone 9 months, Mel, since the so-called expose. Nothing has happened except to pin down Senator Enrile, Senator Revilla, and Senator Jingo Estrada. That's what happened.
What could be the motive behind, if I may ask you?
Well, make it clean up to 2016. And then their prospective candidate will be much cleaner and ready for the elections in 2016 with the support of the PICOS.
Okay, so you don't see any transparency with the PICOS.
None at all.
Will you go to the Supreme Court to question the legality of the PICOS?
No more. They have questioned it. The Supreme Court did not answer.
Will you not follow it up as a group, as prestigious as PHILCONSA?
There are pending cases, and some cases have been decided against the PICOS. The COMELEC has never answered. You see, the COMELEC is an independent constitutional commission, Mel, unless you have forgotten.
Okay, so that explains.
Yes.
Very well. What will happen to Napoles et al.?
Yes, it has become the talk of the town, Napoles. Sometimes I also wake up dreaming Napoles. I'm affected. But let me inject a new dimension into this incident. Remember the so-called Bangsamoro Agreement, which was referred to as the product of a collective minds and genius of several people belonging to other nations, which is questionable as far as I'm concerned. But the fact that they said that when the Bangsamoro Agreement, there will soon be a transition commission that will prepare the draft of a bill that it will send to Congress. But the time we were called to Congress to find out if we had a copy of the bill, we said we do not have, and it was established that not even the Transition Commission that sent its draft to Congress have sent anything to Congress yet. Now, covering this is the eruption of all these names appearing regarding the so-called beneficiaries of Napoles. And if you scan the number, it's almost the entire Congress again and all these things. So, I might have a, what do you call this, not really a dirty mind, but a very...
Probably a malicious mind.
And it's a serious mind only. Why are they not pushing forth the Bangsamoro Agreement, so-called, to Congress, which they claim could be easily approved by Congress? Are these names listed, enumerated in the various dailies of participants? Is there again a game being played similar to the 188 signatories to the impeachment proceedings? Will this not be again utilized to say, hey guys, your names are all here, but we should pass the Bangsamoro Agreement? So it makes me a little curious of all this. So that's how I view again this, I said, a new dimension in the Napoles setup.
Congressman Neri, how do you look at it?
Something will come out of this because I think the frustration of the people will really rise up to unmanageable levels if nothing will come out of this. And I understand Attorney Hermy's concern na pessimistic na. In fact, many have become pessimistic. That's even why there are proposals for another body to investigate. But I still hope, no. So in the end, the ball is on the government side. We've done our share. We've exposed it.
Are you not part of the government?
Well, executive side, we can only conduct congressional investigations, but the actual prosecution will be with the executive. So, and siguro, I'll just bakit optimistic ako because I've always hoped that the people will be able to force government to do something which it doesn't want to do. I agree with Attorney Lumauig na hope springs eternal, no? You know, they've always asked me, you've been into human rights since you were in college, now you're still into human rights and corruption and so on, and nothing has really changed. But I guess there are only two concepts that have really made me do what I continue to do, no? One is, of course, trust. Trust in the capacity of the Filipino people to rise up to the occasion. It may not be as frequent as EDSA 1. However, there is that capacity of the people to stand up and make destiny, and change society. Once you have the trust on the capacity of the Filipino people to change and commit social reforms, then you cannot but avoid the second component, which is hope, because that is what trust leads, that because you trust the people's capacity, then you continue to hope. And I like to believe that all of us here continue to hope, no? Otherwise, we won't be here. Otherwise, we won't be advocating anything. Otherwise, we would have gone to good old USA and just live there forever because there is no more hope for the Philippines. But I'm sure all of us, even the media, continue to hope. That's why you continue to advocate. So I guess there will be a speedy and a satisfactory conclusion to this issue. And I believe that if not in this year, it will come. Kasi justice will always be able to reach out and pluck those who want to remain in oblivion and extract the justice that they so richly deserve. So as I always say, noong panahon ni Gloria, nang palagi kaming talo sa impeachment and we always lose all the cases we filed, bukas luluhod din ang mga tala.
Uy.
So,
Dahil asawa ni Ate Shawi yun, di ba? We have a question from the media. We have one or two questions pa. Sige, go ahead.
Yeah. May gusto lang po akong linawin. Sa tingin niyo ba tama yung ginagawa ng administrasyon? Napabayaan na lang sa Amerika itong external problem natin, while the internal problem, nagkakaroon sila mismo ng pagsiko-siko. O pini-echepera, kamukha ni Bitangkol, ni Margie Wico. No? Pagkatapos kasabay nito yung preparasyon nila sa eleksyon. At pinababayaan na lang yung partikular na problema sa China natin sa kamay ng mga Amerikano.
the Chinese invasion of many of the territories, the aggressive acts of China in the disputed territories is wrong. There is no way they can prove they're 9-dash line. So for us, the position always of the Philippine government is and should be that we will stand pat in our territories against the aggression of China. However, if there is a need for us to ask for support, we go to the international community. We go to not America. A bilateral relation to America is a very dangerous resolution of the issue. It is like you're taking out one bully and replace it with another bully. So you go to the international community, especially those countries which believe that aggression is not the answer to this dispute. So I'm sure we've had the Iraqi people would probably be regretting it now why they allowed the U.S. to come in. The U.S. promised to come in and help overthrow Saddam Hussein, but Saddam Hussein has been dead for a long time and they continue to be there. The U.S. is not there for the benefit of the Iraqi people. The U.S. is there for the oil. Let's go back home a little bit. The U.S. went to Aguinaldo and said, we'll just help you overthrow Spain. And in the end, after Spain was overthrown, they remained here. So a few weeks later, Aguinaldo was a hunted man. And does anybody forget the fact that Gregorio del Pilar died in the hands of the Americans? So For us, that's the more dangerous. We stand pat sa teritoryo natin. Let us have national dignity. If there is a need for us to ask for help, then we go to the international community. We support. You seldom hear us say this about the current government. We support the action of the Philippine government to file that case in the arbitral tribunal because we believe we will win in that case and China will lose in that case. And if China doesn't deign it proper for it to appear there, that is for China's loss. It will continue to lose the support of the international community because there was an attempt for a peaceful and amicable settlement of the issue, but it refused to go to the arbitral tribunal. So for us, that is our solution. The issue of EDCA is not about being pro-China or pro-US. The issue of EDCA is about being pro-Filipino.
Okay. I'd like to solicit the messages of our guests today. Wala po silang kakayahang maging Madam Auring. Pero mula ngayon hanggang 2016, ano po ang nakikinikinita ninyong magaganap sa lipunan sapagkat ngayon school opening. Na noong mga nakalipas na dekada, ang sigaw makibaka, wag matakot. Pero ngayon, you get to watch television with special features about students selling their laptops and their phones just to buy tickets for One Direction concert in March next year. So what future is there for us? Ninoy was heard saying the Filipino is worth dying for. If Filipinos cannot even follow basic traffic rules, pwede pa bang sabihin na the Filipino is worth dying for? Kay Attorney Hermy, kayo po'y napaka-optimistic.
Kung kailangan natin ng pagbabago ay dapat aking palakasin natin ang educational system natin. At saka pag palakasin natin ang educational system, we should be able to inculcate the principles of integrity and proper leadership. Kung wala yon, wala tayong leadership, wala tayong integrity, and if people are not properly educated, wala rin pagbabago.
Sino po nakikita niyong Pilipino ngayon ang pwede sabihing role model ng mga kabataan?
Role model.
Role model. Mukhang mahirap, ano?
Mukhang medyo mahirap yan, Mel. You just look at, you go to some of these establishments frequented by young people, and you watch their behavior. You really, you're dismayed that if these are the kinds of leaders you expect to run this country in the future. Maiiyak ka eh. For instance, Atty. Lumauig said, love of country. They play the national anthem, they don't even stop and pay respects to the flag Monday morning. So, sa akin, kung kailangan natin ng pagbabago, kailangan palakasin ang educational system natin so that the principles of integrity, leadership, and discipline should be there.
May apo na po kayo.
Meron na.
Okay, sigurado pong kung mga babae magaganda. Ano? Paano po kung may manliligaw doon na tatlo hikaw, na ang buhok iba't ibang kulay at may tato sa katawan? Tatanggapin po ba ninyo sa bahay ninyo?
Dahan-dahan, pwede nating sabihin na dahan-dahan ang pagbabago. But, you know, if you look at the future, Mel, there is no way by which you can predict with exactitude how the human mind will work.
Very well. Very well.
Kaya yung mga ating mga political, they'll say, we'll serve this country will be great again. You watch till the time that they execute into action what they have said before in public.
Opo. Kung makikita po role model katulad ni Freddy Aguilar na mayroong nililigawang batang-bata.
Pakiusap naman, huwag na siya. At kasi kung ang pagbabago hanapin mo, palitan na lang niya ang religion niya, delikado yun.
Okay na yun. Okay na. Maliwanag po yun. Okay po.
Tulad nung nasabi ko kanina, lahat yung nangyayari ngayon dito sa ating bansa, napakalungkot. Pero wag nating bayaan na yung kalungkutan natin ma-free-stand tayo sa mga walang magagawa. Habang meron, as long as there is hope that lies in the human breast, and as long as we pray, we are a prayerful people, tayong mga Pilipino, and we believe in a supreme being who always will take care of us because yun tayo pinanganak eh. In the early days, we were a freedom-loving people. And that has always been our heritage from our forefathers. And we will always come to that point. And that's why I said, when the change will come, which is the transformational change that will require from each and every one of us, a change in heart, a change in feeling, a change in mind, mangyayari po, tayo naman, palagay ko, makakampanan natin yung ating inaasahang buhay.
Ngayon po school opening. Do you still remember your teachers? Who among your teachers influenced you the most? At anong bagay ang nakita ninyo sa inyong guro?
Naiba lang yung senaryo, Alan. Hindi ko nasabi sa iyo. Ako'y pinanganak doon sa Cordillera sa Ifugao. I grew up with the Belgian missionaries, a very
CIC.
conservative group. And mula noon, from my grade 1 up to high school, talagang seradong pagkakatoliko, pagkakatiwala sa Panginoon, at pakikisama at pagmamalasakit sa kababayan ang naituro sa amin. Yun binuhat ko mula noon hanggang ngayon.
Congressman Neri.
More understanding to our young today. In the same manner that we find it very unacceptable, yung may hikaw, tatlo-tatlo, and may tato, would probably be the same thing that our mothers used to tell us when we wear bell-bottom pants, mahabang buhok. I think that would be similar eh. And they would probably be comparing us to their younger generation noon that would not have bell-bottom or anything. I guess that's precisely because the youth always nasa forefront sila ng development eh. So sa akin naman, I think I'm very optimistic. In fact, because I believe the system itself is the problem. It's not the person eh. It's not the person. So sa amin, yung churn out ng educational system natin is precisely because the system itself is skewed, no? Skewed siya in favor of, commercial. Everything is commercial. So resulta sila nun eh. Sa akin, I still hope that I believe, not just hope, I believe that the youth will be able to lead and lead effectively. In fact, tayo, na mga older generations, we failed to give them the better society that we would have wanted. Yun naman ang sabi ko dati sa mama ko nung ako'y nag-activista eh. If kung generations nyo, you made sure na wala ng human rights violation, dumaban kayo noon ng henerasyon nyo para malinis ang korupsyon, para naman may respeto sa kapwa, kami na mga bata ngayon, hindi na namin kailangan daanan ang prosesong ito. But because that generation failed to do it, then we have to take up the cudgels for our people. Now, in the same manner, the new generations will have to face a society where graft and corruption is rampant. A society where you're just walking in the street and riding in tandem will just kill you like a dog. So what kind of a society are we giving them? It is a society which shows that from the president down to the lowest councilor, corruption persists. It is a society which manufactures students to become, commodities in commercial markets. Whether it's a call center or whatnot, doesn't matter. It's a commercial commodity. So that is the society we have bequeathed them with. So I guess the blame is rather than on them, but also on us. We failed to change that society. And we really hope that if we fail to reform our society in our generation, we would really hope that the youth of tomorrow will be victorious in reforming society so that the next generation at least will not suffer the same sufferings that the children of today are suffering. So, but in the end, babalik ako doon sa sinabi ni Atty. Lumauig, hope springs eternal, and that is why we're here, because we believe someday this nation can be great again.
Thank you very much. Ang paksa ay kasaysayan. We will talk about history. May kasaysayan ba ang kasaysayan? May kalayaan ba ang kalayaan? We will talk about this by next week in our contribution sa pagmumulat at paggising sa ating mga kababayan. Ang trending sa Twitter ngayon ay Pinoy Big Brother. So, yan ang issue ngayon. Magandang araw po. Maraming salamat. Have a nice day.